Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of The Partial Historians. I am one of your fearless hosts, Dr. Greenfield.
And I am Dr. Radford, and I think my tone says it all. And I have with me today...
We're celebrating...
That's right.
Oh my god.
It's a celebratory packet of Tim Tams. And that means it's an Adriano Zumba flavour. Congratulations, Dr. G. We reached 50 episodes.
Thank you. This is a landmark episode. It is episode 50. We're half a century old. I can't believe it.
I know. Well, we have to have something special, I think, to talk about today.
What treasures?
I know. Well, as we found in our last episode, your account somewhat differed to mine. However, there is one thing that we both have in common at around this time, and that is the death of a very notable figure of the early Republican years.
Ah, yes. Publius Valerius Publicola.
Yes. And in my account, he seems to drop dead after the whole Sabine conflict. Does that pretty much tally up with where he dies in your account?
Yeah, where we have this sort of moment where we're in around about 503-ish.
Yeah.
It's the consulship of Publius Postumius Tubertus, consul for the second time, and Agrippa Menenius Lanitas, consul for the first time.
This is also the consulship that I have for his death.
And apparently, quite early on in this consulship, and this is only just after... Valerius Publicola has retired from the consulship of the previous year.
Sure.
He dies.
Livy says...
Whoa!
I know.
Whoa!
Livy has some great things to say about him, Dr. G. He says, he was a man universally allowed to have excelled all others in superior talents for both war and peace. Full of glory, but in such slender circumstances that he actually apparently didn't have enough cash to pay for a funeral.
The true ideal Roman.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so Dionysius casts it somewhat differently. He says he was never overcome by avarice, so the vice of acquiring money and seeking it out and holding on to it.
Sure.
He continues to live, or when he did live.
I was going to say, what?
He rises from the... That's how significant he is, guys. No. Throughout his life, after some controversy in terms about where he should live, he lives on a small estate inherited from his ancestors.
Yeah.
Leading a life of self-control and being very frugal.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do if you're Roman. Not supposed to be splashing the cash about like some gadabout.
Even worse, and perhaps even more boring, superior to every desire.
Oh, God.
He sounds really boring for dinner parties.
Yeah. But he has had some interesting events in his life, and so we thought we might take a little walk down memory lane.
I think it's important that we recap Publicola. He's a hugely significant figure in the emerging republic.
Yeah.
And he's not just covered in our source material by Livy and Dionysius, but Plutarch also does a whole life.
That's right.
On the poor man.
He merits his own biography.
Yeah. So if you're curious about where we're getting our material from...
It's mostly him.
There is going to be a look at Plutarch, particularly, because we haven't looked at him in that sense, because we've been going through the narrative as events occur.
Yeah.
But there is certainly a worthwhile aspect in considering Publicola's life, how he gets to where he is, what this is saying about the definition of Romanness in this early period.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can imagine that being in the period that he's in, there's probably a little bit of mythologizing perhaps going on with his reputation.
No way. No way. Wait for it. You want some of this mythologizing?
Okay.
All the Roman matrons.
Went into mourning for a year, let me guess.
Yes. To come together and decide that they must mourn for him for an entire year.
But you know what? That's not brand new, is it? We've had that before for someone like Brutus, I believe.
Yeah, so somebody's reaching up into the categories of like, hello.
He is, yeah.
Now, all of the women are mourning for you. What?
For a whole year.
A whole year.
A whole year.
This is a man who's above every desire. Yeah. I mean, seriously, ladies. Like, prioritize.
Well, before we get too carried away by Plutarch, I thought maybe we should have a little bit of a chat about who Plutarch actually is, since we've been very heavily focused on Livy and Dionysius, who are writing more narrative histories, obviously. Plutarch is a little bit different.
Yes.
First of all,
he's a much later source.
He is, yeah. He's writing a lot later than the sources we're currently looking at. Like, Livy seems to have been writing sort of, basically sort of Augustan sort of period. So, we're talking
about the sort of 50 BCs.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Downwards.
Sort of very late Republic, and then into Augustus's rule.
A little bit of the imperial period.
Yeah, exactly. And Dionysius, who we've mentioned before, is more a Greek source.
Overlaps a little bit with Livy.
Yeah.
So around about the same sort of time period, a little bit earlier, but they do cross over. Livy and Dionysius sort of inhabit the same space, if you like.
Yeah. Plutarch, on the other hand, seems to be writing probably about, I'd say about 100, 150 years after these guys.
Yeah, so he's writing in what is going to be like the late 1st, early 2nd century CE, so the Common Era,
and his
output in the Imperial period.
Yeah, I mean, his output is freaking massive.
Excuse
I'm sorry,
your friend.
I got excited with the two times in front of me. Yeah, his output is just phenomenal.
Vast.
Yeah, it's huge. But one of the things that he's probably best known for, is his biographies, basically, which is, it's set out, they're usually called his parallel lives. And this is basically because he doesn't just write someone's biography. He basically takes a significant Roman figure and pairs them with a significant... he takes significant figures and sort of pairs them together.
Yeah, he does try to take a Greek life
generally Greek and Roman.
A Roman life and stick them together.
Yeah.
Write the biography for each.
Yes.
And then have a comparative section at the end.
Yeah.
He's like, so, by looking at these two lives together, what do we learn about the two?
Yeah, so you can only imagine that sometimes... Well, I think basically what we'd say is that you can kind of learn a lot just from looking at who the person's paired with, who's considered a suitable parallel life. Who is their Dr. G to their Dr. Agnes?
Indeed. Who's playing the straight woman here?
Yeah. And also, I suppose the other thing to sort of think about is we might think of biography as being somewhat similar, I suppose, to history these days. But it's considered to be a little bit different. I suppose in the ancient mind, it probably is a little bit more of a separate entity.
Yeah, it's pretty dangerous because when we approach these sort of sources, particularly when you first start reading them, something like Plutarch is so rich in historical detail that you're like, it's like history. Yeah. But it's really not. It's just because you didn't live in the time period.
Yeah.
And yes, it's full of historical detail, but he's not trying necessarily to write history.
Yeah, exactly.
He's interested in providing a moral guide on some level.
Yeah. This is how you should live your life, or not.
Yeah. Taking figures that he's decided he's selected as being distinguished, for instance, is your first issue. The fact that the lives are presented outside of a much broader narrative.
Yeah.
So the narratives are self-contained within the biography.
Absolutely.
So it becomes much more about the subjective events happening around in that person's life.
Yes.
And their impact or influence in them as far as Plutarch is concerned.
Yes.
So he is doing historical research.
Absolutely,
in order to write these biographies.
Yeah. I suppose the other thing to note maybe is that biography is sort of considered like lesser, I suppose, to the practice of writing. I know. I hate to say it, but yeah, it's not considered
Way to offend Plutarch.
I love Plutarch. But it's not considered to be quite as illustrious as writing history, in the ancient world. And also, what we think of as a biography, I think is quite different to what
Plutarch produces.
Exactly,
as an ancient biography.
We tend to expect like it's cliche, but like a womb to the tomb type account of if I'm picking up a biography, I would generally expect to have an overview of their entire life, and I want you to psychoanalyze them and put them on the gas.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get Freudian. Yeah, that's the kind of approach that a lot of biographies take these days. But Plutarch, not just Plutarch, I think in the ancient world, they don't really necessarily see childhood as being this massively important and pivotal period of your life.
Let's start when things get interesting.
Exactly, yeah. Far more sensible approach. Couldn't do anything interesting as a child. Let's just ignore that period.
What is this childhood of which you speak?
I mean, not to say that he doesn't include stories, but if he does include stories about, say, a childhood or something, it's probably going to bear some
moral
reference.
weight.
Yeah, exactly, on how they turn out, anyway. And obviously also he's also dealing with the same sorts of issues as other people are, and availability of material and all that kind of...
And there is some overlap between the sources that Plutarch has access to and the sort of sources that Livy and Dionysius are relying on.
For sure.
But on the other hand, he's also like 100 to 150 years ahead of them in terms of history. So for him, his source material is also Livy and Dionysius.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I was getting lost in your chronological.
Not only.
Yeah, exactly. He could be looking at them.
He's going to be looking at them, as well as other material.
It's like that song, I'm looking at you, looking at me.
I would like to agree, but I really don't think it is.
I had to bring up a song somewhere. It's our 50th episode.
No.
Anywho, so without much ado, is that all we need to say? I think it's probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's.
Okay.
Publicola, a life in retrospect, pulling all the threads together.
I feel like I should have some piano music here.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the parallel life that Publica is paired with is Solon, the lawgiver. Ooh.
Yeah, who we're really not going to talk about.
No, but I think it says something about he's an equally. I mean, Solon's sort of considered a bit to be potentially
a
mythical
foundation figure for classical Athens.
Yes, exactly. So he's obviously quite pivotal in in Athenian society. He may be somewhat mythical, who knows? But yeah, so it kind of says a little bit, I think, about where Publicola sits. That this is who Plutarch's chosen to pair him with. And he basically starts by giving a bit of a history of the family. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah. So what we learn about, we should call him by his real name. So Publius Valerius.
Sorry, yes, he hasn't had the extra title yet.
Yeah, he hasn't gained the title Publicola yet. But Publius Valerius is of Sabine extraction.
An ancient Valerian family.
Yes. So he has a bit of a Sabine heritage, which is going to be really interesting, given how much time the Romans spend at war with the Sabines during the period that we're about to embark
upon. You have
upon.
to assume that it's probably not the most unusual thing, given that Rome's had bloody Sabine kings.
Look, there's a lot of cross bloodlines.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's getting very confusing. I think the distinction is largely semantic rather than genetic.
I agree. But I think it's significant that what Plutarch signals about his family ancestry is that perhaps one of his ancestors helped to sort of bring peace between the Romans and the Sabines, when they were originally having...
Oh, the irony.
Well, at least in one of the points in time when they were having trouble. Yes.
Well, yeah, indeed. And interestingly, Plutarch also sets up Valerius as a figure that sort of heralds democracy.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. That he's going
to be... for all intents and purposes, laughable.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you laughed at on cue.
When do I not?
But it is, because there is really nothing very democratic about the Roman system at this point in time.
No,
nor is there ever.
No. Particularly not when you're almost constantly consul.
No.
But he is definitely set up right at the beginning of the life. Plutarch basically says he is going to be incredibly just. He's very charitable to the less fortunate. He's so awesome. Anyways,
he's almost as democratic as he can be, given the constraints of the situation he finds himself in.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Thanks to Plutarch for making this really clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In that he's not a total bastard to the lower class. Exactly.
Yeah. As we will see.
Yeah.
So, just to do some broad brushstrokes on a few of the things that Valerius is involved in, you may recall that he and Brutus are the two figures that really instigate the downfall of the kings of Rome.
Yes, absolutely.
And come into the consulship in order to make some of this work out. So this is 509.
Yeah.
And Publius Valerius and Brutus come into the consulship, And that's like this sort of moment of change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Plutarch does actually mention that when the whole downfall of the kings and happened, that initially Valerius wasn't chosen to be his first colleague. Rather, it was, in Plutarch's version, the husband of Lucretia who was chosen, and Brutus is just, quite frankly, not happy, Jan.
Not impressed.
No. In Plutarch's version, he wants Valerius, and Valerius wasn't chosen because he was, a worse dude or anything like that. But people apparently are still perhaps a little bit afraid about what's going to happen with this whole downfall of the kingship things. And therefore they think, let's maybe keep it a little in the family and give it to the husband of Lucretia.
Keep it on the down low.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really the main reason why Valerius is sort of passed over.
Who really needs to be compensated here?
Yeah, exactly. But and Valerius sort of basically, he's like, well, screw you guys then. I was totally going to do an awesome job, but I'll just, take myself, out of the field. I'll just retire. I'll give up the Senate. I'm not going to do anything, in fact, anymore.
Giving away all of my goods. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody becomes really concerned that he's actually going to defect.
Yeah, and they're like...
And hang out with the Tarquins.
Yeah. Have we made an enemy here? Yeah. But he is still amongst one of the first to take that very important oath where they say, we'll never, ever, 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 ever
let the Tarquins back.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he was like, I'm so on board with this. I'm totally doing this. And everyone's like, maybe he's not so bad after all.
Exactly, yeah. So he's right there at the forefront of everything that's happening, even though he's, claimed to, bugger off and not do anything. Not have anything to do with public business anymore.
Yeah, look, and he has a bit of a dicey period early on because he's living in a really nice house on the top of a hill.
Bit too swish, I've heard. A bit too above his station, perhaps.
Yeah, because he does get into the consulship.
Yes.
And everyone's like, but you look like you could be like a king. Living in your nice house on the top of the hill. It's very fancy.
Yeah.
And we've encountered this narrative from a couple of different perspectives. Yeah. But interestingly, in Plutarch, it just goes extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Way more extreme than Livy and Dionysius take it. Because in Plutarch's account, he actually sort of gets the house razed. Burns the house down.
You want me to have the house? Fine.
And he was like, fine. You think I'm a king? You think the house is a signal of my interest in kingship? I cannot even begin to tell you how that's not true. Let me burn down this house. I've made myself homeless, and I'm living with my friends.
That's quite a statement. It's quite a statement.
This is way more extreme than we see in Livy and Dionysius. Just putting it out there. I think this might be a little bit of a hyperbole.
Perhaps. Because basically he just starts living with friends until the people say, oh, all right, well, build a house here then. We're happy with this location.
Let me give you some land.
Exactly.
Yeah, the people get together and are like, look, that's probably not so appropriate. How about you live somewhere?
We didn't mean that we wanted you to be homeless. I think you've taken it a little bit too seriously. Yeah.
In any case, Valerius seems to take on board the issues that people, or the concerns that people have raised.
Absolutely,
he becomes really proactive as a lawmaker.
Yes, definitely.
And
hint, hint, Solon, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I'll use the parallels. Yeah, so he does very particular things. And
I know you're just dying to bring up the axes and the lictus rods.
I am. Just you wait for it. But I got a lot going on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, because there are new details about the lictors and the rods.
I
in
know.
Plutarch.
I know. Yeah.
New information or more hyperbole.
Indeed, yeah.
But he opens up the consulship so that more people are able to enter themselves into the running for the consulship. So this is nice.
Yeah.
This is good. More people can be involved.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, that's not very kingly.
Breaking down the barriers is always a good sign.
He does some really specific things to get the plebs on side.
Yes, this is laws about people having the right to, like a commoner having the right to sort of appeal a judgment from one of the consuls.
Yeah. So a judgment is made by the consul. You don't agree with it? Appeal.
Yeah.
Appeal.
Say something.
You're a person.
Say something. No.
No.
Yeah.
Not like that. Well, you can, depending on how you feel. But yes, the plebs are now allowed to appeal.
Yeah.
the idea that no one can enter a magistracy without having the approval of the people.
Yes, that's pretty important, yeah.
On paper, yes, but in practicality, not so much.
Well, yeah. I mean, and to be honest, like, you kind of assume that goes without saying. Like, I wouldn't just wake up one morning and go, you know what? I feel like a consular kind of day today.
I think I'm consul.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, that's right.
Way too soon.
Yeah.
They haven't made that connection yet.
But still, it's nice to have it formalised, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a show or a display than a practicality, given the way that the centuries are organised for the voting blocks.
Absolutely, yeah.
The plebs ultimately probably don't really end up making any of the decisions.
No, I dare say they don't.
But the idea is that
it's nice to make them think that they do.
Gestures, that's what's important. Yeah. And loosening tax restrictions.
Yes.
This reminds me, this puts me very much in mind of Ronald Reagan. Draw what parallels you will, dear listeners, from that parallel.
Yeah, exactly.
But the loosening of tax restrictions, so to encourage business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, if it's...
Making Rome a prosperous place for all.
Yeah. Let's see how that worked out in modern America.
Yeah. Well, that's not entirely fair. I mean, Rome is somewhat...
Apples and oranges.
Yeah, exactly. Rome is somewhat agricultural at this point in time.
Everybody's well on board with the lifting of tax restrictions.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Everyone likes that, yeah.
And even more exciting is this idea that actually... if you show disobedience to the consuls, because the idea is like once you're in a magistracy, you have the power.
Yeah.
If you disobey a consul, you do have to pay a fine.
So, that sounds fair.
Yeah.
5 oxen and 2 sheep. Yeah.
Ouch.
That's quite heavy. That does sound quite high. But you want to discourage people.
Are you part of an agrarian nation or what?
Exactly.
You want to lose that ox?
I totally am.
You just keep resisting the consul.
And a vegetarian one at that. Go figure.
Wow.
Yeah. So does this bring us to the axes? Come on, I want to get to the axes.
Oh no. Well, the axes are coming. I think, I'm pretty sure I read about the axes.
Yeah, okay. Well, basically what I've got is that this goes back to something you've mentioned before, in that we know that the lictors, they have axes attached to the rods, which they tend to, travel about with, whatever.
Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. And basically, he removes the axes from these rods, and when he comes into the assembly, inclined and lowered the rods themselves to the people.
This is a very new detail.
It is.
The idea of the axes being removed from the fasces,
which is like a consular thing.
Symbol of power.
Yeah,
that's all well and good.
Yeah,
down with that. And then this idea, all of a sudden, that you would lower the rods minus the axes to the assembly.
Yeah, a bit of a
as
nod.
a gesture of respect.
Absolutely,
everybody likes a gesture of respect.
Yeah, and something that Plutarch says, Plutarch says is still a tradition in his own time. So it's kind of a nod to the people,
Because they are the sovereign rulers of this grand republic.
Exactly, yeah. It is SPQR.
Well, and that's probably really quite important at this point in time as well. I'm like, you've just thrown out the kings, and you're like, how are we going to make it clear that this is a different type of system?
True.
We have to create new rituals. There has to be new symbols.
Absolutely, yeah, because you don't want to just see, as you said, I think, when we were talking about this originally, you don't want it just to be seen as, okay, so we've got rid of one king, now we have 2.
Check it out.
Double the trouble.
Everyone wants to rule.
Yeah, so you want to make it seem a little bit less
of less threatening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I might be the magistrate, I might be the consul, but you voted me in and I respect you for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because of all these sorts of things that he finally gets that title. Does he not?
Oh, yes, Publicola.
Yeah.
Oh, cherished by the people. Oh. Yeah, well...
Go gooey inside.
Yeah, and to just cement the claim as far as Plutarch is concerned, we have this idea that comes up in his account, where if somebody makes himself a tyrant, sets himself up as a tyrant, he can just be slain without any trial. You notice a tyrant... You just kill that person. Take him down.
Take him down. And you won't have to pay any penalties.
Yeah, it's amazing. You're free of blood guilt if you can demonstrate proof that the person was acting as a tyrant.
Yeah, That sounds good.
Neat and tidy.
I would love some real life examples of this. Like, it's my wife. She was totally acting like a tyrant.
I can't even begin to tell you.
Yeah.
She just assumed office in the whole household.
Exactly. But yes, anyway, so it's very important democratic moves. Yeah.
And also some treasury reforms, apparently.
Yeah, and this one actually kind of jumped out at me as well as being quite significant because of the fact that basically you can imagine at this point in time it might not be super formal the way you go about collecting money when you need it from the people, like to wage a war or something.
People, we're going to war. I need all your money.
Yeah. Collection tin. Ling, ling.
If you can't sign up with the dollars, you might need to sign up with your body.
Exactly, yeah. So basically, he doesn't want it to be seen that, he's collecting money and then, like, taking it home. So the idea that, he doesn't want anyone to have that kind of power, not just himself.
I'll look after your cash for you.
Yeah.
Wink.
Deposited in my cellar. Oh, no!
Where did it go?
Yeah. Instead he basically deposits, whenever there is a need for this, he deposits the public funds in the Temple of Saturn. And basically, apparently sort of sets up the whole idea of the quaestors, or the people who look after...
Well, this is what I find curious, because this hasn't come up anywhere.
No, I know.
In any of our other source material.
Thing, yeah.
So I have large questions. The idea that the quaestors are invented by Publicola.
Exactly, yeah. Is this just making Publica sound extra awesome?
Look, I'm going to maintain a level of neutrality in accepting this claim at this point in time. But it's interesting.
Yeah, it is, definitely, yeah. And for those of you who don't know, because I don't think we've really talked about it before, quaestors are basically, they're on what will become like the cursus honorum, which is like the
path
ladder
of honours.
Exactly, yeah, the ladder that Romans sort of climb
in order to
ambitious
achieve
politicians. Yeah, exactly. When consulships are right at the top. Quaestor is one of the lower rungs. Still important, but yeah, it's one of the stepping stones. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So this is totally a new detail. Anyway, I then have this idea that Publicola, God, that really is a mouthful to say. That basically, when he has a new consul, the father of Lucretius, he basically says that because he is an older man than himself, that therefore in the consulship he should have the privileges of seniority.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Nod to the, respect for elders, hello. And therefore, to him, he commits the fasces.
Wow.
Yeah, again, something Plutarch claims
How
continues
unusual.
to this day. Again, another detail which I don't think we've talked about before.
No.
And
I much prefer the one where they get to switch it between them every month, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds much more fun and more fair.
Yeah, and so it's kind of an interesting little extra detail there again. Are we just trying to insert Publica in every significant moment that we can? Yeah.
If we can make inserting Publicola
like
a useful phrase for people, I think we should definitely run with that.
Insert a little Publicola into your day.
Yeah. Have you tried inserting the Publicola?
What's that fragrance? Valerian Publicola.
The people love me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay, good.
So he has this process. So, like, his consulship. So it's 509-ish.
Right.
Where he shares it with Brutus. 508, where he shares it with Titus Lucretius. 507-ish.
Actually, sorry. Can I insert something here? Sorry.
Is it going to be Publicola?
It is going to be Publicola.
Then by all means.
Okay. I just thought I'd also note the fact that when Brutus obviously falls in battle.
Sad face.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that Publicola gives him this magnificent oration.
Oh, yeah.
And Plutarch says that that's also something which, is so awesome. And the Romans like the idea so much that they start to get on board with this idea that when someone really awesome dies, then you should have this sort of
and I think this has been backed up with the other sources that we've been looking at as well.
That was mentioned, I think.
Yeah, this is something that Livy and Dionysius do cover, this idea that the funeral oration, the public funeral oration for a significant citizen is sort of prompted or inspired by this speech.
Absolutely. And I think that sounds
Valerius
reasonable.
gives from Brutus.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Definitely. Sorry. Continue.
Ooh.
So you get 508, I believe.
Ooh, 508.
Yeah.
So he's consul in 509.
Right.
He's consul in 508.
Ooh.
He's consul in 507.
He's on a roll.
Oh, he's not a king. Not a king. Publius Valerius Publicola shares his third consulship with Marcus Horatius Publius. And then he takes a few years break.
Well, you wouldn't want to give people cause for concern, would you?
Not when you've been doing so well at being a people person.
That's right.
And not when you would arouse their suspicion in the beginning.
Yeah.
By appearing like a king.
Yeah, it is the early years of the Republic, so I think even 3 consulships in a row might be pushing.
Look, it's intense, and I wonder if this is partly them trying to sort it out. Like, what is this thing? And it's like, well, you've done this before. Maybe you could do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't know if I'm ready to take on this role.
Yeah, I don't know. What does it even involve? It's like, you seem to know what's going on. How about you do it?
Yeah.
And he holds his last consulship in about 504.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's again with Lucretius.
Yeah. And that's sort of towards the end of his life, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he dies the next year.
Oh, sad face.
Yes.
But we're not quite there yet, are we?
No.
There's other stuff to talk about, yes. Obviously, as you might have guessed, there's quite a lot of warfare going on in this period. Where
Really?
I know. It somehow switched my attention.
It's passed me by.
Yeah, it's kind of
large.
a period of conflict.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. The Romans seem to, be warlike or something.
Are they having problems with the Sabines?
They might be. And the Tarquinii and basically a lot of people. Porsenna,
The Latins.
Whatever. Yeah. And Publicola seems to be taking quite a front and central role, in a lot of these.
He is.
In a lot of these conflicts.
That's the power of consulship.
Yeah, exactly. And, when they're feeling a little blue, he's there to perk them up, in their battle against the Tarquins, And also, am I jumping ahead too much if I talk about Publicola and Porsenna?
No.
Okay.
No, do it.
So, we talked before in quite a lot of detail about, what the hell is going on with Porsenna. And Publicola, being the wise character that he is, because he's not just about war, he's also about, he might have valor and that sort of thing in battle, but he's also a diplomat, he's awesome in all ways. And so he's the one that sort of sees that perhaps Porsenna would be better off as like an ally rather than someone that the Romans constantly pissing off.
Maybe we can persuade him to join us.
Yeah, he seems to be basically saying, okay, well, we want to somehow work it out so that this guy is no longer, I don't know, besieging us.
You know what would be nice?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so I've got, this really interesting story which sort of jumped out at me is Publicola's sort of central role in negotiating the giving of hostages to
offering
Porsenna.
his own daughter.
Yeah, which I think we did mention briefly.
But Valeria gets much more of a mention in Plutarch's
Exactly,
life.
yeah. And Publicola seems to be much more involved in sort of striking this deal with Porsenna and saying, hey, whoa, things have gotten way out of hand. You think we didn't like you? It's really not about that. It's just, Tarquins, whatever. And Porsenna sort of shows himself off as being the better man in this sense because he basically says that, I really respect you, Porsenna. I happily would make you the judge of, this whole dealings that we have with these ex-royals. Whereas Tarquin, of course, being an arrogant twat, says, no man is my judge, especially not you, Porsenna, even though that doesn't really make much sense because Porsenna's kind of his ally.
Supposed to be allies at that point in time.
But that's where, he sort of shows his mettle as opposed to, the king that he's helped depose. And I think that's obviously, that's Plutarch making the comparison particularly clear, I think.
Oh, yeah, but, and then you get the little details where Plutarch is clearly, overblowing the story.
Yes.
Good times, because we have the story of Cloella.
Cloella,
And her and the maid's defection.
Yes.
So they had this hostage situation with Porsenna.
Yeah.
The Romans send some children, including some maidens.
Yeah.
Some of the women escape,
Yeah.
and Cloella is the most prominent one of these.
She seems to be the ringleader. Trust to a woman to be at the heart of this struggle. Yeah.
They're very much involved in history, even when they don't come into the narrative.
Yeah, and in Plutarch, she actually, interestingly, crosses the stream on horseback.
Don't know where she got the horse.
Yeah, exactly.
Since the whole setup was apparently that they were bathing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Difference in the detail.
Yeah, details.
Yeah.
Maybe you wash with a horse for good luck.
Maybe that explains her equestrian statue.
Well, interestingly, and this is where Plutarch does a bit of the old hyperbole on the whole story, where he basically speculates that the equestrian statue that is granted to Cloelia is quite possibly for Valeria instead.
True. Yeah, that's right. Yes. Which is definitely something that I haven't had mentioned before.
Look, I would just dismiss this as trying to insert the Publicola into this narrative.
Yeah. If he's an awesome dude, then all his offspring must also be awesome.
Have you considered?
Let's just forget about Brutus's sons and the whole traitor thing. But, you know. But yeah, basically, I remember when we talked about this whole story of Cloelia, about how you talked about when they have this, amazing escape and they swim away or ride/swim away. They make it back to Rome and they're like, hey guys. And Publicola basically sort of, in this version, takes a much stronger version than we've ever seen before, like actually rebuking them. Well, not exactly rebuking them, I suppose, but basically saying like, nah, this is not going to be a situation where I think you're awesome or I give you any sort of...
I'm not giving you guys credit for this.
No snaps. No snaps, yeah.
You are actually ruining negotiations at this point in time.
Exactly, and it's also because he feels like it's going to reflect not just badly on, how the Romans have behaved for Senna, but how his word is sort of, going to be, basically sort of worthless after this.
Yeah, it's like I've spent a lot of time trying to get these negotiations happening. You hostages were part of that negotiation. You're really undermining our chance of achieving a peace here.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm sending you all back.
Yeah, and that's basically what you said. I remember you saying that in your version of things, the consuls really do, throw the women under the bus.
They do, quite substantially.
But it's not, I don't think Publicola is specifically singled out there, is he, as being...
No.
The ringleader of this. Yeah.
And actually, the way that Plutarch narrates this is kind of a little bit more redeeming for Publicola, because it's less about just throwing the women under the bus and then saying, look, like, this has got nothing to do with us, this was never about this.
Yeah.
It's more framed in terms of, like, look, the negotiations are going to stagnate if you don't go back.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm getting you all together.
It's going to look a bit suspicious.
Yeah. You haven't really thought through the implications. I know you're not having a great time
Women.
with Persena.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's important. You need to go back now.
Yeah.
Which is a much more reasonable type of narrative, to be honest.
This is kind of where, with the maidens going back, like I know in Dionysius you talked about how there was this... sort of twist to the narrative in that as they were journeying back, the Tarquins decided, let's seize these maidens because for some...
Interception!
Exactly, yeah, let's double cross. Think we're allies with you, Porcena? No! Yeah.
I don't think you understand how seriously we're taking this situation. We actually just really want to be in charge of everything.
Exactly, yeah. So in Plutarch's account, not only does he include this story, but he actually has Valeria... Publicola's daughter basically making a daring escape during this time when the Tarquins are trying to seize all the maidens.
Ooh, how exciting.
Yeah, and that's probably perhaps why I suppose maybe she's suspected as being the one who's deserving of a statue. That's kind of the reason I suppose he gives for her maybe being an alternate equestrian statue receiver.
Well, perhaps.
Yeah, so again... inserting a bit of Publicola into your day.
You can enhance any narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of brings us, I suppose, rather neatly back to the whole Sabine affair, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Yes. So basically, when trouble starts up with the Sabines again, funnily enough, in Plutarch's version, it is not Publicola who's consul, but his brother. Marcus Valerius. And Postumius Tubertus. But
yeah, that's okay. Yeah. That makes sense. That's exactly what we have in our other narratives.
Yeah, exactly. And basically what Plutarch says, which I don't think I remember reading in our other versions, I could be wrong, but he basically says that Publicola is crucial nonetheless in giving advice to these two guys.
Of course he is.
Yeah. And because of that, basically they have these two massive battles. And in the second one, they don't even lose a single Roman, even though they kill like 13,000 of their opponents. Maze balls.
the podcast is not the right sort of format for me to convey my wordless, speechless ingratitude.
It's pretty
at
amazing.
This sort of
it's pretty amazing.
This moment in time.
To not lose a single Roman.
And how many of the Sabines were lost?
13,000 apparently. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. That just shows that even when he's not in charge, he's mere advice. You know? You follow his advice and all is well. You know?
Well, and, having, like, Marcus Valerius, your own brother, as consul.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you've got the ear of Publicola.
Totally, yeah. You're going to be sweet.
You know how it's going to go down.
And
no lives lost.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And this is where Plutarch brings up that story that you talked about before about the house being given with the special doors.
Oh, the special doors.
Yeah,
I love this story.
Yeah, they open it out rather than opening in like all the other houses. Yeah. So another
surprise.
Yeah. And then, of course, Publicola himself is consul for the fourth time when the Romans are facing the Sabines yet again. And also perhaps in trouble with the Latins.
Yeah, and what I really like about this particular version of this narrative, because we're getting right towards the end of Publicola's career at this point, is that we get this idea that there are more portents involved.
Yes.
Now.
The Sibylline books.
Yeah, and I have these moments where, like, these religious things happen, they leap out at me, I'm like, ooh, it's my time to shine.
Please, go ahead.
This divine sign. Apparently, all the women in the city who are pregnant deliver children that are deformed and premature.
That is definitely not a good sign.
Well, not for future generations of warfare, no. It's a pretty bad sign.
Yeah.
But they're like, what does this mean?
I think everyone's pretty scared.
I'd be quite... This doesn't sound like a good portent. No. So, consultation with the Sibylline books, as you do. And the upshot of this is that they decide to make a whole bunch of sacrifices because you've got to propitiate the gods because obviously this is not a good sign.
Of course. Clearly things are not going as they should.
Yes. And the advice is that he needs to start up some games.
Yes, to Apollo, I believe. Yeah.
Which had fallen by the wayside. The gods are not pleased by this and are punishing all of the future generations accordingly.
Yeah.
With their premature and deformed births.
Yeah. It's a pretty clear sign.
Yeah. So interestingly, even though it's not tied into the war effort in a broader sense, it's sort of like this sense in which the Romans always need to achieve balance between what they're doing in their social and civic life and how that will reflect later on in their war affairs.
You can understand them things were falling by the wayside considering they've been at war like a lot.
You know, guys, I know we've had a tough, 5 or 6 years worth of war with the Sabines, but we really need to have the games.
Yeah, exactly. Apollo's not going to wait.
Apollo's still mad at you.
Exactly, yeah. Now, interestingly, when we talked about the whole tension between the Sabines and the Romans before, we talked about this seeming defection of Appius Claudius, who becomes, that whole family becomes very significant.
This is
Roman
the start
life.
of the Claudii.
Yeah, exactly. From the Sabines to the Roman side, basically because, for whatever reason, like Claudius maybe wasn't so keen on going to war with the Romans, and so he and his tribe, basically do exactly what the Sabines were afraid he was going to do and pack up shop and go to the Roman side.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, now this in itself, okay, that sounds all right. But in Plutarch, again, it sounds like Publicola is much more involved in getting this defection to happen. It's very Cold War.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. So, Publicola knows that they're going to defect and he gives them, grants of land. Like, we know about the grants of land, but the fact that he sort of seems to be the one kind of orchestrating it. And, of course, he makes sure that Appius Claudius himself gets, the hugest portion.
Yeah, just keeps inviting them over and, doing a little bit of the old, you should join us.
Exactly. If you join us, look at all this land that you could have.
Have you considered ours?
Rid of you.
Malaria in the summer.
A place in the Senate, I think I can arrange that. So the fact that this very significant family seems to owe its origins in Rome to his machinations.
Yeah. The subtle charisma
I know.
that is Publicola.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of, again...
He waves a magic wand over Porsenna. He waves a magic wand over the Claudii.
What can I say? He's a diplomat as well as, someone who's also in battle.
And a gentleman.
Yeah.
No wonder the matrons mourn for him.
Exactly, for a whole year. Yeah. Exactly. And that sort of brings us to the narrative, I suppose, that you were talking about last time with the whole, the Romans hiding in their ditches and near Fidene. And
yes. The ditch hiding.
Yes, exactly. And, they're trying to crash the Sabines and la la la. And so, eventually we know the Romans, triumphant. And it seems that they owe a lot to Publicola in this.
Oh, has he been part of the strategy, has he?
He is being lauded as being quite important, not just the gods, but the Publicola. He is crucial. And that's pretty high to say that he's, the gods
he dies that year, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Like, how useful could he have been?
Well, yeah, but yeah, the fact that, it's... Yeah, he's up there. He's up there again. And then, as you say, that kind of brings us to the end of its glorious life, which when you think about it, everything that we've been talking about has apparently happened in about 5 years.
Well, it has. Yeah. But, it's laying out the details.
Yes, absolutely. And this is obviously, again, I suppose, obviously biography is perhaps setting out a morality, but it's morality that people are going to find useful. And that is going to centre on, sort of how you conduct yourself in public life.
Yeah, and Publicola, the way that this story sort of comes to a conclusion in Plutarch is emphasising all of the sort of values that Romans are interested in, attaching them to themselves.
Final section.
Yeah, in a way he becomes set up as one of these first ideal Roman citizens of the Republican tradition.
Yeah.
Because he dies and the poverty in which he has lived his life.
Yes.
Presumably in the latter half after he's burnt down his house on the fancy hill.
That might be where he lost his money.
Yes, there's this sense in which they want to bury him with honour. And it should be done at a public expense.
Yes, yeah.
And everyone should contribute towards that.
Absolutely,
But actually, this is something which is also tied in with the fact that he doesn't seem to have a huge amount of money.
Yes, it's kind of in Plutarch, it's kind of a joint thing. It's, okay, yes, he's not particularly wealthy, but also we want to make this gesture.
Yeah, we want to recognise this individual with some sort of particular honour. We're going to bury him at public expense.
And not only that he's buried within the city... And that his family are also going to have the privilege of being buried.
Yeah, and this is a huge honour. Yeah. And we don't see anything quite like this again until much later on.
Yeah.
But we do also have this conceit, if you like, that happens where Plutarch sort of explicates that actually they don't bury people in the city.
Yes.
They make a gesture towards burying them in the city and then carry them out of the city and bury them somewhere else. Because let's face it, it's a bit of a health hazard.
Yeah. It's all about the gesture, isn't it? Yeah. And I guess I might wind up, if I might, Dr. G.
Oh, please do.
With yet another sickeningly sweet evaluation of Publicola, the people's friend.
Yes.
So far as it can possibly be achieved by men who are regarded as honourable and good, he had brought his life to perfection. Makes me think very much of an Oscar Wilde quote, which allowed me to observe that you seem to be the absolute embodiment of perfection.
Why?
I think I'm paraphrasing. But nonetheless, you get where I'm going with that. And so did Oscar Wilde. Well, so in that vein, as we near the 50-minute mark, happy 50th episode.
Yes. 50 minutes for a 50th episode. Absolutely. I think it's quite an achievement.
It is.
Thank you, dear listeners, for your patience, forbearance, tolerance, interest, love.
And please, don't feel afraid. Don't be afeared. Please share your love for us, which I'm sure there is much on iTunes.
Oh, yeah.
Twitter,
we're interested in hearing from you. Facebook, Twitter, iTunes.
Let us know.
Our WordPress page.
Yeah.
We have many things.
Exactly. We welcome feedback. We welcome praise, of course. But honestly, we're happy to hear your thoughts on any issue. If there's something that we do that you like to hear more of, if there's something that we do that you'd like to hear less of, whatever your thoughts are. If you just want to chat to us about, the Roman Republic, what bastards the Tarquins are. We're always willing to have a chat.
I'm open to stories about how are we going to actually get rid of the Tarquins.
Exactly. Trust us, it's coming. It's coming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can only live for so long, even in mythical terms. All right. Adieu.